And the book really belongs to my mother, who was a consummate storyteller and inherited that trait from many generations that came before her. They only have these stories, of course, the stories I tell them, and the stories that are in this book. I'm still learning the lessons of my mother's life. And one of the most instructive stories that I have the pleasure and the honor of carrying, I discovered toward the end of the book. I'm going to read a little bit from that piece. It's called, my epilogue called My Turn. A few years after my mother died, I discovered a cache of papers she left in my childhood bedroom closet. She buried them in an act of elegant and amusing symbolism underneath a pile of my father's long-forgotten wrinkled shirts. The papers consisted mainly of poems, drafts and drafts of them, but there are a few essays. I hadn't known she wrote essays. One of them is an autobiographical narrative about her life as a child in the Jim Crow South. It's called My Turn. When my mother was a child, she often accompanied her beloved grandmother, Mama Timpy, to a local grocery store. In order to get to the store, they had to walk past rental houses owned by a lumber company. One day, some white boys threw rocks at the two of them. A pleasant stroll turned into a nightmare, my mother wrote. Mama Timpy, who practiced the kind of black stoicism that has served as a guiding principle for African Americans since the inception of African presence in this country, walked on without evincing any emotion while the white boys jeered and pelted them with stones. When my mother asked Mama Timpy why they were being treated that way, her grandmother told her that the boys didn't know any better and should be pitied instead of hated. My mother idolized Mama Timpy. She accepted her grandmother's reasoning and, as an adult, went on to practice the same kind of forbearance that made Mama Timpy the embodiment of strength and moral fortitude in the poetry my mother wrote. But the rock still wounded. She wrestled with the wounds in My Turn. Her grandmother's keen analysis of the nature of racism, that it was a consequence of ignorance, did not stem the flow of blood that ran down her leg. After reading the story, I knelt on the floor, my heart racing. I reached the final lines and then started all over again. I was looking frantically for something. What was it? I didn't know, but I kept scanning the lines over and over, my throat tight and my breath short. There was something I needed that I didn't see. What is it? I kept asking myself as I read the paragraphs again and again, and then searched through her other papers, looking and looking. For what? Some words to correct the abomination of the rocks and my mother's bloody leg. And then I realized that what I was looking for was the salve, an answer, the end. For while the tale of how we suffer and how we are delighted and how we may triumph is never new, it must always be heard. There isn't any other tale to tell. It's the only light we've got in all this darkness, James Baldwin explains. It took me a while. It took the journey of this entire book, but I realized that there was a lesson, which was, in every scar there is a story. The salve is the telling itself. Thank you. I think I'll stop there. Any comments or questions? So many friends here tonight. Thank you so much for coming, everybody.